Hello and welcome to another Through the Leadership Lens, a podcast presented by the Women in Propane Council. My name is Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd. And today we are so excited to have my good friend, Dan Richardson, owner of Conger Gas in Georgia, joining us today. And you'll have to give us more information about your company later. But we are so excited to have you here. And as you know, we have this podcast and we have been talking to people within the industry and some people outside the industry about leadership and what leadership means to them. So, Dan, to kick things off, will you just give us an idea of what does leadership mean to you, both professionally and even personally?
And
What does
before
it mean
you
to you?
answer that, let's go to a quick Irish Propane sponsorship. They're the ones that are giving us the year sponsorship for the Women Propane Council. So let's go over to Irish Propane really quick.
Through the Leadership Lens is sponsored by Irish Propane Corporation, serving Western and Central New York. For all your residential and commercial propane needs, choose Irish Propane. Irish Propane is a locally operated, New York State certified, woman-owned business. For more information, visit irishpropane.com. Irish Propane delivers peace of mind.
Okay, Dan, we're back. Go ahead and let us know what leadership means to you.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It was quite a surprise to receive the invitation and quite an honor. I was very thrilled to get it. And so anyway, but leadership to me is about having responsibility of others. It's more than a title. It's not just a title. I mean, I had my first, I guess, management position at 18 years old. I was in the grocery business at the time, trying to find. Really, I was just looking for a job to get through college, and I was a bag boy at a local supermarket. And so the manager came over, and I didn't know I was being interviewed, but he said, Dan, I want you to get someone to sweep the front. And so I said, okay. So I went over to pick up room. He said, no. I said, I want you to get someone to do it. I said, okay. I had no idea I was 18 years old. And so anyway, so I walked over to another one of the bag boys and talked to him just a minute. And he grabbed a broom and he swept the front. A few minutes later, the manager took me to the back, and suddenly I had a management title on my name. And but that was kind of an interesting start because, as I did that and I progressed, one of the things that I always look at when you look at a leader is you look at the people that work with them and the people that they choose to work at that business or whatever it is, committees or whatever. And one of the things I've always been taught is go find the best people. And that's what you'll see, I think, a true leader do. They're not intimidated by having strong people around them. In fact, they love it and feed off of it. And also, those people are in your charge, they're in your care. A leader is someone who develops others. And one of the things that I looked as I moved up in management in a corporate situation in an earlier life was I looked for people who developed others under them to also move up. And they had people who developed and moved up and even sometimes surpassed them, but it wasn't a problem for them. So that's how I view leadership.
Yeah.
That's a really great. I like how I wrote down, go find people, go find good people. And I was going to ask you, what do you look for when you find those good people? And you answered it by people that are looking for good people. So you're starting at the top of the business and saying, if I want good people to work for me, I need to find good people that'll work for them. And that's so important to structurally build a business, Dan. That's a great story. Where do you find your inspiration from, Dan?
Wow, that's an interesting thing. I guess part of it's my faith. I would have to say that definitely. If I did not have that, it would be, you know, we live in a different world these days, and I, that's not always a bad thing, but it's just that the world is moving at a faster and faster pace, and you can have everything figured out on one day, and 30 minutes later, everything that you knew before is totally different. And particularly in propane and in energy right now, it's a moving target so much of the time.
Mhm.
And you know, with all the situations, it seems like. But so you've got to have something you can anchor to, and for me, it's my faith, it's my family. You know, those are things. I'm blessed with a very good family. I have my wife Vivian, that we've been married now 44 years, dated for 3 years before that. So she knew what she was getting into when she said yes. So, and I remind her of that from time to time. And so we have 4 kids, and now we have 9 grandkids. And sometimes it's nice to shut everything down and maybe make a FaceTime call, you know, and remind yourself, you know, what's really important. So,
Yeah, Dan, I've had the pleasure of hearing you talk about your family and especially Vivian over the years. And I think as we look at the dynamics that have shifted in the industry, right, even individual company changes and then more globally with the propane industry, you've made some tough choices within your company and taken some big risks. And so we talk a lot about leadership, and that sometimes leadership is being willing to take risks. And then you have this faith that's grounded you so much throughout your life. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that risk that often comes with leadership, and maybe some examples of things that you've done in your company that are different from what other people have done. And then if you could just share that and kind of what that internal conversation can look like that pushes you forward.
that's something I think that I have to remind myself constantly. Every decision is not going to go like you want it to go. It's going to sound good
Mhm.
when you make it and think about it. And a lot of times I may include our, you know, other people in our organization, you know, and bounce things off of them and see what they think. You know, a lot of times I'll do that, particularly if it's, you know, I'll go back and say, we have such strong people in this company. Um, and I'm kind of like a proud father. I like to carry some of them with me to meetings and show them off because I'm very proud of
Mhm.
them. And so, yeah, taking risks. I'll go back to the story I've told to several others, but there came a point in time where I had concentrated so much on cutting expense and was looking so much at expense until our gallons were gradually dropping. And it was sort of like a never ending story or a never ending battle. You cut your personnel, you start cutting service, and you start losing gallons, unfortunately, or you're not getting people calling you and asking you about your business. So I'm headed to a meeting one day, to a Georgia Propane Gas Association meeting, and I'm on the interstate, and I'm thinking we've got to do something different. We can't keep going in the direction that we're going. Something's got to change. And so I called up Tucker Perkins. He and I were good friends, and I trusted Tucker's advice a lot. He had seen things, you know, and it's good for you to have those people like that in your life that you can call, who have other experiences that you can feed off of and that you can ask and get advice from. And so, you know, I told him, I said, what I want to do is I want a marketing company to come in, and I want them to look at our company not from an industry standpoint. And I think that's one of the things we fall in this industry. we gauge ourselves based on what other industry people are telling us. But I wanted someone who would look at it from a complete consumer viewpoint, customer viewpoint. And the only thing I wanted them to know about propane was how to spell it. And so we did that. We also, and Bridget, I think I probably called you, and we did the sales training that you guys had. We took half the company on one day, took the other half of the company on the other day, and we adopted the motto that everyone sells. I think that's also about the time that I brought Bill Moore in. Stuart Weedi, who is another person that I lean on a lot and trust a lot for his opinion and viewpoint. And I'll also Tamara Kovacs, who at that time was with Propane Resources, to come in and do evaluation of the company. And that was very eye-opening. She did a very thorough job. The presentation she had was fantastic. And so, all those people together with different things that you lean on to get advice from others, we decided to go differently. Later on, as part of that process, we took one of our CSRs who had a background in sales, and we made her our marketing director at that time. Later on, we added Kirsten McAlpin in, and that was an interesting deal, adding her in. She did some radio marketing for us and came by, and we'd gotten to know her. And I knew her from when our youngest was in show choir with her, and really liked her at that point, her personality. But she came on as an assistant at that point. Later on, as things would have it, she left. I contacted her one day and said, "Aren't you ready to come back home?" Thankfully, she answered, "Yes." We've got to talk first. And I said, "Okay, that's fine. That's fair." And
well, I think, Dan, I think listening to your story and listening to how you've grown people, one of the common themes that you have always been willing to do, I think it's a testament to kind of your background, but also the vision you have, right? Is that you have a vision of what you want for your company and for your people and for yourself, and a standard, but you're also willing to take critique and feedback to get you where you want to go. And I think that, to me, that type of constructive criticism is so helpful, especially for people in the leadership role, to be willing to take on that criticism because it supports that vision. And I'm wondering, do you have, you've mentioned Stuart Weedi and Tucker Perkins and these other people who have been so helpful to you in, maybe personally, but also certainly professionally. Have you had key leaders in your life who you try to model your own leadership after, and kind of how has that changed?
I don't know that I've had one person in particular. One of the things, when I got involved in the association, I came over to be a part of Conger in 1998. Before that, I was with a major, so that major did not allow me to go to meetings and with the associations and like that, and didn't encourage it because I never did it. Once I came over here with Conger, I had some people reach out. I had Dan Gurley, who, gosh, I miss him. He was one of the guys that when everybody left about 5:30 in the afternoon, everybody was gone. I knew I could say anything I wanted to in the office. He was one of the people that I could call and say, "Oh, I need to cry to you. This happened and that happened, and it's not fair." And he would listen, and he would let me vent, and he would say, "Okay, are you finished now?" And then he would say, "Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you, and you're not going to like it." And I wouldn't, but it was always good advice. It was always good
Right.
advice with it. And so, yeah, like you're talking about the critiquing. So Dan helped me a lot. Mike Davis
Mhm.
with Davis Propane, who's a really close friend. Sometimes he notices me doing things before I even talk to him about it and says, "Hey, what's up with you?" All those,
Mhm.
Mhm.
it's good to have all those various type people in your life and to have a diversity of it is a good thing.
Yeah. You kind of surround yourself with people that are like you, but in all different aspects of you need those different ties into your life. You don't want to just hang out with the same type of people. You don't want to let only the certain same type of people into your life because you need to see all different aspects. Dan, going back to your incredible story about the timeline, that was just really the huge risk you took. When did all of that occur? What years did you say one day, you know what, we're going to make some changes, we're going to bring in some help, we're going to restructure some of our staff? What time of life was that? What time frame was that?
February 16th, 2015. Is that is that
2015.
specific enough?
That's
It was
perfect.
a
And here's
Tuesday.
my question,
It
my
was a
follow-up
Tuesday.
a
Yeah.
Tuesday. So what has changed since that day in February in 2015 up until COVID hit, and then after people started coming back to work? What has changed in your leadership style based on what came from 2015 to 2020, and then 2020 to now 2022?
Something that Bridget said a while ago. I do have a vision for how I want things to be. Now that can evolve, and it does evolve, but overall, the main part of it stays the same. But I would say on management style, when I was younger, I'll go back and say it this way. When I was younger, my management style was pretty much so black and white. And in fact, it was kind of interesting at church when we would be celebrating Armed Forces Day that weekend. And if you were in the military, they would play the military songs, and if you were, say, in the Air Force, you stood up when the Air Force song was played, and
Mhm.
some other things like that. And so after church was over with, one of the younger guys came up to me and he said, "You didn't stand up." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, when the Marines came on, you didn't stand up." He said, I just knew from knowing you and how you do that you were a Marine at one point." I said, "Nope, I never was. I was not in the military." And they went, "Oh," and they had this look on their face. I said, "You honestly thought by the way I acted I was like that?" He said, "Well, you said it. I didn't, Mr. Dan. So, and but I think I'm more accommodating. But when the decision has to be made, the hard decisions, you've got to make them. But I think I am more accommodating, a lot more accommodating than I used to be, and more willing to listen to other people.
And do you think that's because of the younger generation of employees that you're hiring, or do you think it's just the way society has changed to say, let's focus more on empathy when you're leading someone over you know managing them? Like, what's your thoughts on that? Is it the hiring of the people, or do you think it's just change?
I've learned as I've gone through that, I don't know everything. And and that there are other people who have really good ideas. And when one of the things that I like to do and I try to do, and I will tell people when I hire them, that if I've got to micromanage you, if I've got, I'm going to give you an overall vision of what your job is. And then after that, I want you to take ownership of it.
Yeah.
And if you can't take ownership of it, then you and I have a problem at that point because you're not the person that I need. Um, I want to be able, from my perspective, I want to be able to do other things and deal with issues more up here, um, I've had an employee walk back before and ask me something that was, to them, it was a big deal. To me, it was minutia down in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally stopped them, looked at them and said, look, you know the parameters, make the decisions. You don't have to ask me about every little part of it. Make the decisions. If you're wrong, we'll talk about it later, and use that as a teaching experience. And also, I will say this, and Viv will tell you this in a heartbeat. If we have to depend on me playing poker for a living, we will go broke. Because I'm the type person you can pretty much just look at me, and I might as well just have a billboard that says, here's what I'm thinking right now. and I mean, I can't hide that very well.
Which we love about you.
That's awesome.
We love that.
I was going to say, Bridget, you know that very well, don't you? I mean, Bridget will look at me at a meeting sometimes, and then all of a sudden I'll just see her turn away and start laughing because she knows that I'm going, what the are you thinking?
What exactly?
Yeah, what exactly is happening here, and what planet are you from?
I love it. Well, so Dan, that's a good segue into we know, but some people listening might not know that you currently serve as a PERC counselor. You have been very involved and were in the president role at the Georgia Propane Gas Association. You're very involved in the SEPA Association and at NPGA. And those who do not follow Dan on LinkedIn or any other social media channel may not know how involved you are at your church and in your community, and the emphasis that you have put on kind of giving back, whether that's in a charitable way or in a professional association structure. Will you talk about why you value that so much, both professionally and personally, and how that's impacted you?
You use the term give back. I always think I get more out of it than I give back, to be honest with you. Just like being involved in the associations that I am in, the various the charities or the church or the associations, all those different things, I come out of that learning so much and making connections and making friendships. And I mean, I'm really always amazed at things that happen for our company. I mean, just like with PERC, I would hear all these things about PERC. And we were very involved with you guys and reaching out to you and leaning on you for different things. And, we would call about something and you guys were just like Johnny on the spot, just, right there. And helped us. Even sometimes you called us and said, hey, we've got this thing going on. Are you guys interested? I mean, would you try this out? Or, with irrigation engines, we were new with that. And we got, Cinch Munson reached out and others. And I don't know, people have been so good to us. How can I not turn around and be good back to them? And going back to the management part of it, of giving, when I was in the grocery industry, the first store, I was 26 years old. The average age that most people made store manager was at 36 or 37. And my district manager told me right up front, he said, I'm sending you to the armpit of the industry. I said, okay, that's really cool. Thank you. And he said, you're probably going to get rid of most of the people. I know you. And I said, okay. And I did. I mean, the first year after we moved in the new location, just out of curiosity, I looked back at the separation notices and there were like 126 in the file. But I had one of the business leaders in town come in one day, and we were standing up front talking, and he was looking across the front at the cashiers, the bag boys, and the operations that was going, and he said, "I want to know something." He said, "Where do you get these people?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Where do you find these people? You have some of the best people working in here of anybody in town." He said, "I enjoy coming in this store." And I said, "Well, we're just very upfront with them. We set the parameters, and I tell them when they're hired." And again, this goes back to, I should have been a Marine. I explained to them very well that they have 30 days to impress me. And if they can't impress me in 30 days, we're probably going to part ways. And I said, we don't have a lot of turnover. And but what was even better was later on, we started having people coming up and becoming store managers on their own. And it was so neat to later on go see them in their stores. They were so happy to see me. And I think we all need to realize sometimes in this world that we need others, and I don't care what age you're at. I'm getting old now. So,
I hear a lot, and I think one of the key words for true leadership is trust. And you're saying, I give them 30 days and we negotiate some things, we discuss some things. I find people that are going to be good for my company. You're getting people asking you, how do you get all these great employees? I think the biggest thing you have, Dan, is trust.
Yeah.
And you just give so much trust into the people that surrounds you. And that makes a great leader in a person when you can just openly say, I believe in all of you.
Yeah.
And that's a really key leadership goal or comment that I heard.
Also, your people have to trust you as well. And that also comes back that whenever you do have someone, and sometimes I've been guilty of this, of hanging on to someone too long, trying to give them, I guess, an extra chance. And sometimes that's cost me some people. I had two people in a similar role at one point in time, and I did not realize the friction that was going on between them. And I lost a very good employee at that time because of it. So that's something too that you always have to make sure that your other employees want to make sure that everybody else is doing. And the other neat thing that we have here that I really like, we had an instance just recently where at one of the offices, we lost all the employees but the manager. And after it happened, I found out, I should have already been here and this should have already happened. But I had employees in this office come up to me without me going to them and say, "Hey, do you need me to go up there and work?" I said, "You're willing to go for a week, stay in a hotel and do this?" Yeah. And in fact, the three service techs that went up, they set up their own rotation and said, "Okay, here's how we're going to do it. Is this all right with you?" I said, "Perfect." And that happens so often in our company. I mean, and makes my job and what I can do so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Dan, one of the things that is so genuine about you, and, I think some people try to put this on, right? Like it's like a Halloween costume. They say the words like, "Oh yeah, you have to build people up and you have to do these things," but you sincerely do that, right? You sincerely, whether it's at an association meeting, and, I see it all. I get the luxury of seeing it all the time. And I just think being around you and around the people who work for you is a true testament of your type of leadership, because you build people up and you want to showcase them in a way that people that are doing lip service to that never can.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's cool. It's cool to see your company changing. It's awesome to get to know the people who work with you. And I don't think a lot of people can say that, and certainly not in this industry. I think it's a tough, this industry. I come from the building industry, is a lot of similar type A personalities, and not as willing to be in the backseat, right? And let those people shine. So I think it's no surprise to me that people are willing to kind of bend over backwards, but it's a testament to your company for sure.
Well, and sometimes I'm guilty of saying, I wish other people would understand that. Unfortunately, in this industry, sometimes what happens is we take people who are good operations people and we think they're going to be great management people. And that's unfair to that person. We put them in a situation where they're not going to succeed. But there's some good companies in here. I mentioned Stuart Weedi a while ago. Stuart and David Reynolds at Blossman. It's interesting. When I go to a meeting somewhere, I tend to gravitate over to those guys because a lot of similarities, I think.
Well, I think you also have a circle of people who are willing to raise the bar. It's not about my company and your company. It's about how do we raise the bar.
It really is. I mean, the old saying of, rising tide lifts all ships. And I wish sometimes our industry would look at that more because, I received a phone call this morning, and don't get me wrong now, I appreciate the business I'm going to pick up, and I'm thankful that this person doesn't know how to treat customers, because we're going to pick up a really good account this morning. I really get tired of hearing, going somewhere and people talking about their propane company in a negative way. If they talk about it in a positive way, it helps all of us.
Right.
So.
Well, that's great first half of the podcast of just discussion about leadership and stories and getting our viewers to know who you are, Dan, and thank you for all that great information. Now we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit. We're going to switch it over to the whip round. This is where we just ask some fun questions, kind of take the tension off a little bit of now let's just end with a little bit of fun. So I'll let Bridget
now you can
start.
let your hair down, Dan.
Now you can relax. You can breathe a little bit. So I'll let Bridget kick it off.
All right, Dan, this is the fun part. And you have to answer fast. We got to it's the whip for a reason. What do you keep in the trunk of your car?
Well, I have a truck, so I don't have that. I would say what's under the back seat in the truck.
Okay.
Of course, I have tools. It's a tool bag, and I have extra jacket, raincoat, rain suit, things like that. The thing, though, I'm going to add a part to that. I'm disappointed about one thing that I can't keep in there, and that's chocolate. Someone has got to come up with a way that chocolate can be stored in a vehicle for emergency situations.
Just like your rain gear. It's an emergency. I need it.
Well, I have a solution for that. If you move up here to Minnesota from the months of like November to March, you can store chocolate because it stays nice and frozen. You don't have to worry about it melting. So Dan, normally I ask this question, what would you, if you go back in time and talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you say? I'm actually going to ask you that same question, but say 18-year-old self, because you said you were working at a grocery store as a bagger as an 18-year-old kid. What if you can go back and talk to that 18-year-old bagging groceries? What would you tell that person?
I would probably say to that person, you don't have to be perfect. And I think we need to think about that as we raise our kids. I loved my mother, but she was, if you wonder where I get a lot of my personality from, there it is, which is really discerning for a male full of testosterone to say, you want to hear that you took after your dad, but I took after my mother. But I watched myself because the way I learned from her was her negative comments. And I learned what not to do instead of what I should do. And so you don't realize it until maybe later on in life that maybe you would have relaxed. Maybe you would have enjoyed things a little bit more. It's nice to be driven. It's nice to do all that stuff. I mean, I can remember it at age 29 having my performance reviewed by the president of the company, and this was a regional company. We had stores from Mississippi to South Carolina and Tennessee down to Florida. And he said, "Where do you see yourself with this company in the future?" And I looked at him without blinking an eye, and I said, "I'll sit where you sit." And he said, "Well, that's," he said, that's very confident. I said, not if you know you can do it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I love it.
yeah. So, yeah. I probably needed a little chocolate that day. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little chocolate would have helped me out before I went in for that interview.
All right, Dan, if you were not in the propane industry, and I'm going to add not in the grocery business because you spent such a significant amount of time there, what would you do? What would you do to earn a living if it wasn't this?
I don't know. It would have to be something with people because I really enjoy people. And I'm going to share a little secret. Kirsten is listening in over here on this. And she would nod her head at this. Whenever we go somewhere, if we go for lunch, I will leave the table at least once or twice, or somebody's over at our table at least once or twice talking. Elizabeth Manning came, was that last week? Yeah. That was last week. She was here, and so we went out to lunch, and she kind of more or less kind of said, do you pretty much know everybody that's in here? And I said, well, lived here a long time.
Did you just announce your candidacy for office?
No. I would be a terrible politician. I would be terrible.
So. No. They'd be lucky to have you.
They would. Dan, what's your perfect vacation?
What's a vacation? The perfect vacation would be, first of all, being with family or friends that I really enjoy, that I can be myself, say whatever I want to, and they still love me anyway, or at least most of the time they do. And that I could just relax and somebody else makes the decisions. Just let me be along for the ride. Yeah. And again, Kirsten's over here snickering because she's saying, yeah, that's going to last for about 2 seconds. But,
Good luck.
But yeah, I mean, just let me relax. I don't want to be president, CEO. I don't, just let me be Pops or let me be Dan.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that sounds awesome.
And at that point after that, I don't care what we do.
I have to tell you, Dan, I cannot believe we made it through 45 minutes of recording, and I didn't hear a dog's reference once.
You don't see the book behind me?
I see it right behind them.
That's subliminal messaging. I can't
believe it wasn't woven in.
You don't see how that's carefully set up?
I can't believe it.
It's perfect.
Yes, I'm a huge.
Well, we appreciate you doing it.
I am
diehard
not only
fan.
weight-wise, but I'm a huge dog.
Well, thanks for doing this, Dan. We had fun.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. And before we end, is there any advice you want to give to any of our viewers, listeners, anyone that just heard your story, Dan? What's a 1 or 2 sentence piece of advice you want to just pass on before we end?
Always be willing to learn. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks, Bridget.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you,
guys. Thanks, Freddie.
This has been another episode of Through the Leadership Lens presented by Women in Propane. Be sure to subscribe, download, and share with a friend. To learn more about Women in Propane, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or online at www.womeninpropane.org. I'm Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd. Thanks for listening. Until next time.